Asia's monarchies defy history. In modern era of democracy, worlds of tradition, mystery, and ritual command fascination and respect like never before. Asian monarchs are symbols of continuity, living connections to the past that are often loved and loathed in equal measure. Royal families appear an anachronism, relics from ancient times. Yet they still have a grip on their subjects, an aura that can't be replicated by mere politicians, as much as they may try. Nowhere is this more true than Cambodia, where the majesty and splendor of the great Angkorian kings still weighs heavily on modern leaders.
They are the symbol of the nation. Without symbol, it's like a human being do not have heart.
King worship has been and remains the foundation of the modern Cambodian state. Recently, Cambodia has been dominated by the figure of one man, Norodom Sihanouk, a man whose career path reads like a work of fiction. King, then prince, prime minister, then film director, king again, and now king father.
When you're in power for too long, you become corrupt. You become a dictator.
Now, corruption and human rights abuses have become so endemic to Cambodia, it threatens to undermine the rebirth of a country that was once the greatest civilization in Southeast Asia. Monarchy in Cambodia has lasted more than 1,000 years. It has survived against the greatest of odds, from foreign invasions to colonialism, coup d'etats to communist revolution. Legend has it that Cambodia was formed by the marriage of an Indian Brahmin and a Cambodian princess, whose father was a dragon king. The Brahmin shot a magical arrow into the princess's boat that so frightened her she agreed to marry him. The Dragon King then drained the waterlogged kingdom as a wedding gift and named it Kampuchea. The kings of Cambodia can trace their origins to this mythical pair, and the influence of India and foreigners in general on the course of Cambodia's history was established. The idea that the king was related to God and only they could decide for the good of the people developed from those ancient times.
ប្រជាជនឬក៏ប្រជាពលរដ្ឋដែលនៅក្នុងសម័យកាលនោះគិតថាព្រះរាជាគឺជាក្សត្រដោយសារតែឥទ្ធិពលនៃអ្វីមួយដែលហៅថាចក្រភពហើយរឿងនោះគឺតាក់ទងមកពីក្លឹងតែម្ដងគឺគេគិតថាព្រះមហាក្សត្រនឹងលោកគឺជាអាទិទេពមួយប៉ុន្តែមិនមែនអាទិទេពដែលនៅលើមេឃនោះទេតែជាអាទិទេពដែលនៅលើដី
Kings were worshipped as fathers of the nation, providing security and prosperity. During the great Angkorian civilization that lasted from the 9th to the 15th century, this devotion to the kings was so strong, people gave their lives to building and carving the magnificent temples that still exist today. This paternalism continued right into the 20th century, when King Sihanouk won independence from the French and called himself the father of the nation.
ព្រះបាទនរោត្តមសីហនុព្រះបិតាជាតិបាទដែលខ្មែរចាត់ទុកថាជាមិត្តរូបជាតិហ្នឹង លោកទ្រង់ស្វែងយល់ណាស់អ្វីដែលជាសេរីភាពអ្វីដែលអធិបតេយ្យជាតិអ្វីដែលជាបូរទឹកដីហើយលោកជាអ្នកការពារអ្វីដែលគេថាសាសនាណាបាទយើងដឹងហើយបាទគេថាបាវនារបស់ប្រទេសយើងគេថាជាតិសាសនាក្សត្រមិនអាចគេថាវាបែងចែកដាច់គ្នាទេ
Sihanouk was ousted from power by a coup d'etat in 1970 that eventually gave way to the barbaric Khmer Rouge. Since the 1980s, politics in Cambodia has been dominated by the figure of one man, former Khmer Rouge commander Hun Sen. Cambodia now holds elections and has reverted to a constitutional monarchy under Sihanouk's son, Sihamoni. But a culture of corruption, especially amongst the armed forces and police, has been allowed to develop in recent years, something Prime Minister Hun Sen has promised to tackle.
Corruption is the major issue in this country. You can see that every report come out from the UN or from any research or international organization that is dealing with corruption. Cambodia will be the worst place on earth.
Cambodia ranked almost at the bottom in Transparency International's 2009 Corruption Perception Index. Politicians hoped for a better future whilst living with the nightmare of the Khmer Rouge.
For us, it's not exactly what we dreamt of when we were stranded on the refugees camp on the Thai border and Cambodian border. We thought that we could, with a new start, have a democracy. At least the people will be free to talk. I know that maybe peace and stability is at that price, but at least they should strike a balance.
2004 was a turning point in Cambodia's history. After 60 years, the overwhelming presence of Sihanouk suddenly disappeared, and Prime Minister Hun Sen moved quickly to fill the void. Sihanouk's son, Sihamoni, continues as a living connection to the god kings of Angkor Wat and the hundreds of temples that still exist today. Angkor Wat even graces the country's flag. Cambodia's entire identity revolves around king worship, derived from that ancient and glorious civilization. For the last 1,000 years, Cambodians have worshipped their kings as representatives of God. But there's controversy as to whether or not the kings were seen as directly descended from heaven.
I think most scholars these days would accept the argument that it was not that the king was himself a deity, but that the king represented some of the spiritual potency of a particular deity, that the king was sacred in certain ways, and that particularly dead rulers and dead royal family members might be represented as deities in the temples.
In Cambodia concept, the king represents the god. We call the rite that the Brahmanism have taught us and we conduct, we call Devaraja. The Devaraja can transform the king to be as a god.
Brahmanism was the concept of king worship imported from India. The Devaraja was a ceremony of god worship that only the king could perform.
ព្រោះថាអានេះជំរាបអញ្ចឹងគឺថាយើងយល់គឺថាវប្បធម៌ខ្មែរថាទៅយល់គឺថាលើមូលដ្ឋាន2មូលដ្ឋានទី1គឺថាខឿនវប្បធម៌មូលខ្មែរទី2ទៀតគឺថាវប្បធម៌ឥណ្ឌាការរួមសង្វាស់រវាងវប្បធម៌ទាំងពីរនោះធ្វើឲ្យខ្មែរមានលក្ខណៈវប្បធម៌មួយដ៏ពិសេសវិសាល
In the year 802, this fusing of cultures gave birth to the first king of Cambodia, Jayavarman II, who laid the foundations for a thriving civilization that was to last for 700 years.
ជាស្ដេចចក្រភពមួយដែលល្អនោះ ដែលជាការចាប់ផ្ដើមកំណើតនៃសម័យអង្គរនោះគឺដោយសារលោកត្រឡប់មកស្រុកខ្មែរហើយលោកធ្វើការបង្រួបបង្រួមជាតិលោកយាងទៅកាន់ភ្នំគូលែនដែលលោកបានបង្កើតទីក្រុងមួយឈ្មោះហៅថាមហេន្ទ្រពុរៈដែលជាក្រុងមហាព្រះឥន្ទនោះ
Jayavarman II and his subjects built their first city in the Colonial Mountains, 45 kilometers from Angkor Wat. The fact that it's one of the highest points in the country is no coincidence.
The mountain is important to our people, to our Brahmanism, because we need the temple represent the mountain. So we build the temple as a mountain, and we look at the God on the top of the mountain.
Every king that followed Jayavarman II wanted to build on his success, to build bigger, grander temples to honor Jayavarman as the founder of the kingdom. Each king would demonstrate his divinity by controlling nature, as the gods did, by digging reservoirs and irrigation channels. For this, the king expected complete subservience from his subjects, and a pattern of authoritarianism was established in the country that continues to the present day. People worked tirelessly in the name of the king and God. These were vast enterprises, similar in scale to those of ancient Egypt and the Mayan and Aztec civilizations of Central America.
People have to use their own labor to work for the nation, not only for the God, but for their own obligation. So people pay the tax, but not really money that we used to say in our present day, but we use our labor to work for the people, to work for the nation, and work for the king, finally, work for the God.
This grandiose temple building culminated in the magnificent Angkor Wat, a 12th century temple dedicated to the Hindu god Vishnu and built under the reign of King Suryavarman II. It's estimated over 300,000 people worked on the temple, which took over 40 years to complete. Every temple built was a catalogue of the world of the gods and the kings, a documentation of their wondrous exploits. Nowhere is this more evident than at Angkor, where the bas reliefs of the temple are lined with depictions of battle and the celestial apsaras, women who danced for the pleasure of the king and his courtiers. This tradition has been kept alive in modern-day Cambodia, although now the apsaras dance for tourists as well as kings. As Buddhism took hold in the country from the 13th century, Cambodia's kings began to be seen as representatives of Buddha and not Shiva, Vishnu or Brahma from Hindu beliefs. The first cousin of Suryavarman II, Jayavarman VII, has become known as the greatest of all the Angkor kings and was thought to be the first Buddhist king. His temple building was on an impossibly grandiose scale and can be seen as a direct response to the invasion of the Champa Empire from present-day Vietnam in 1177. Jayavarman VII mobilized his subjects to defeat the Champas and embarked on the largest program of public works Cambodia has ever known. King worship was at its height.
លោកបានគិតថាអ្វីដែលជាជំងឺរបស់រាស្ត្រ នោះគឺជាជំងឺរបស់ព្រះមហាក្សត្រ
The Angkorian civilization was at its most majestic, and the extraordinary number of temples and roads, bridges and schools were testament to it.
តាមប្រវត្តិបាទព្រះអង្គការរបស់ព្រះបាទទី7គឺថាលោកសូមឲ្យខ្មែរបាទចំនួនលោកថារក្សាអ្វីលោកបានធ្វើហ្នឹងសមិទ្ធផលលោកបានសាងសង់ហ្នឹងព្រោះថាលោកធ្វើហ្នឹងមិនមែនសម្រាប់លោកទេគឺថាសម្រាប់គឺថារបស់អ្នកអស់គ្នាដែរមិនគ្រាន់តែតំណាងនៅគឺថាមូលភាពជាតិទេក៏ប៉ុន្តែតំណាងនៅភាពរុងរឿងហើយលើសទៀតគឺថានិរន្តរភាពនៃវប្បធម៌អរិយធម៌ខ្មែរ
Jayavarman's own state temple was the incredible Bayon, a multi-faced building of ascending peaks, each with a face on its four sides. Some believe that these are depictions of Jayavarman himself. The grandeur of the Angkorian civilization and the reverence of its kings started to decline after Jayavarman VII. War between its neighbors in present-day Thailand and Vietnam would come to dominate Cambodia until the arrival of the French at the end of the 19th century. In Angkor, the irrigation system broke down and the capital was moved to Phnom Penh.
ដោយជាអំណាចរបស់ព្រះក្សត្រចេះតែចុះទិញខ្សោយម្ដងទីម្ដងដោយសារកត្តាប្រមាណបានលើកនឹងសារសង្គ្រាមស្ថានភាពការបំផ្លិចបំផ្លាញនៅរាល់ហេដ្ឋារចនាសម្ព័ន្ធទាំងអស់បាទហើយអ្នកចេះដឹងខ្មែរក៏ចុះទិញខ្សោយដែរត្រូវគេចាប់ឆ្លងសង្គ្រាមបំផ្លិចបំផ្លាញកំពី4ខ្នាតក៏ប៉ុន្តែចង់មិនចង់គឺថារូបភាពរបស់ផ្សាច់ខ្មែរនៅតែថិតថេរជានិច្ចក្នុងគឺថាមនុស្សឆ្នាំរបស់ខ្មែរនៅតែស្រឡាញ់ព្រះមហាក្សត្រខ្មែរព្រោះតំណាងនៅអធិបតេយ្យជាតិខ្មែរទាំងមូល
The dominance of Thailand and Vietnam over Cambodia meant Cambodia's kings were often living in exile or confined to the royal palace. Foreign invaders dominated the royal family and would often appoint the king themselves. Cambodia was in danger of losing its kings and its entire territory. It was only the might of France that saved them.
For more than 200 years, the Cambodian crown bounces back and forth between a pro-Vietnamese faction and pro-Thai faction. So almost every single ruler in the 17th and 18th and really through the 19th centuries was linked more to one side or the other. And so as soon as you get a ruler who's been put on the throne with support from one side, then you've got another faction that's getting ready to throw them over.
In 1857, the French arrived in Cambodia, and it was their intervention that finally put an end to the rivalry between Thailand and Vietnam for Cambodian territory.
We called the French to our rescue because we were, as you know, from end of 16th century, it was the Siamese attack, and then beginning of 17th century, it was the Vietnamese. So at the end, when the French arrived, Cambodia was reduced to a small territory.
The French protection can be both good and bad. If no French, I believe that we have no Cambodia today.
In 1863, Cambodia became a French protectorate, and at the beginning, this was a bilateral relationship. The following year, the Cambodian throne was granted to King Norodom, and the French allowed him to reign, realizing they could use him to help control the population. The French slowly chipped away at his powers, helped by Norodom's addiction to opium. He was powerless to stop his colonial minders.
When France became a republic in 1886, I think, and then they forced the king to sign a treaty. They bring in, they call Colonial, in front of the present royal palace. At night time, they invade the palace and force the king to sign an agreement to let the French rule the country.
France come to protect us, protect our land. But inside of our land that you asked me to say, they come to exploit us too.
King Norodom died in 1904, bitter that although the French were helping Cambodia modernize and develop, they were also bleeding the country dry. The French romanticized Cambodia above all their other colonies in Indochina. To them, it was a special place which gave them little trouble and a great deal of resources. Norodom had complied with the French purely to ensure his own and his dynasty's survival. Norodom's half-brother Sisowath took over, someone altogether more sympathetic and sycophantic to the French. Cambodia had become a fully fledged colony. The days of a protectorate were over, and authoritarianism became once more the system by which Cambodians were governed. Sisowath died in 1927, by which point the French were firmly in control. Whilst neighboring Vietnam pushed for independence, the French viewed Cambodians as docile, easygoing people. Managing the kings was the least of their concerns. In 1941, the French decided to unite the Norodom and Sisowath branches of the royal family, appointing an unknown 19-year-old who was related to both lines, Norodom Sihanouk.
They believe that since he's young, it's easy to control him, but they make a mistake because he's was a lot of problem.
I think they held a wrong perception. He said, oh, his prince is very young, his personality is more attractive by women and music and, a rising horse. He gets some ideas already about how to bring Cambodia to reach independence. French Marshal, I said that Prince Sihanouk is a crazy, but he's a genius crazy boy. This young prince has some vision about his kingdom.
The French had appointed someone who would become a nationalist hero and who would dominate political life in the country for the next 50 years. Post-World War II, the French filtered back into Cambodia after the defeat of the occupying Japanese forces. Elections were held for the first time, and the Democratic Party drafted a new constitution that estranged King Sihanouk from the political process. This enraged the young king. Sihanouk began a long process of gaining the people's support and opposing French rule.
The French granted the country a new constitution in which constitutional monarchy was adopted and implemented. But even so, given the personality of Norodom Sihanouk, he did dominate the political scene.
Sihanouk refused to accept the limitations of a constitutional monarchy. With French support, he dissolved the National Assembly. Then, in 1955, with the French preoccupied by events across the border in Vietnam, they finally granted Cambodia its independence.
He went to the countryside. He worked for the people. He wanted to take action in order to follow up the king from the Angkorian time. Work with the people in order to gain more power from the people, like Jayavarman VII.
In 1955, in just 1 year, Sihanouk persuaded the French to leave, proclaimed independence, abdicated, formed his own political party, and won office as Prime Minister. It signaled his monopolization of power. The cult of personality, first started by the kings of Angkor, was back in vogue.
Sihanouk, of course, has always felt that he knew best for Cambodia. And so when you had elections, when you had a political process, it was always meant if it did not produce the results that he thought were best, then he would try to nullify it. I mean, that was fundamentally his view.
People consider King Sihanouk as the father of the independence. I think he's helped this part of the historical, event without spend any bloodshed between French and Cambodia.
During the 1955 elections, ballot boxes were reported missing. Opposition leaders allegedly harassed, critical newspapers shut down. It was a model of authoritarian politics that continues in Cambodia today. However, Sihanouk was genuinely popular and Cambodia became relatively well off.
1964-65, at that time, we are richer than Singapore. So this is why he became very popular among Khmer people.
In the 1960s, events taking place in neighboring countries threatened Cambodia's stability. Sihanouk boldly declared Cambodia neutral in the Cold War, but it teetered on the brink of communism as the influence of China and North Vietnam grew.
I think Americans accuse him of being the Red Prince, but he has to work for the interests of Cambodia, not for the interests of either the communists or the U.S.
The fate of our homeland, they don't mind about it. They are more patriots for dollars than for Cambodia.
In 1963, Sihanouk took the bold step of cutting off American economic assistance, thereby allying himself in their minds with the communist side.
Whenever you see discussion of Sihanouk, you always see the word mercurial, right? I mean, it's always used to refer to him, and he was. Everybody, even the most sympathetic observers of Sihanouk's time in power, have to recognize that this very, very strong personalizing of any perceived insult, any perceived slight, that this really, this made a lot of his policy stance very problematic.
Sihanouk managed to maintain good relations with Cambodia's former occupiers. And in 1966, French President Charles de Gaulle honored Sihanouk with a state visit to Cambodia.
He wanted to see himself as a statesman, as someone that was going to be respected and be able to kind of play with the big boys. But he did not have the temperament for that. He didn't have the sort of self-restraint for that. And so that meant that after a certain point, I think fewer and fewer people really took him seriously.
Sihanouk became increasingly vain and bored with politics. And in a bizarre career move for a former king and current prime minister, decided to throw all his energy into directing and starring in his own feature films.
I used to read international press. Some articles will mention Sihanouk by name, or sometimes they call him a playboy. I was not sure at that time what is a playboy is all about. I was confusing that a playboy may be a boy that likes to play with many things.
And while Sihanouk was playing at being a movie star, by the end of the 1960s, the Vietnam War was threatening to spill into Cambodia.
Americans were in trouble in Vietnam, and Cambodia was supportive of the North Vietnamese and the Viet Cong. So the Americans had to do something to ensure that Cambodia stopped supporting the North Vietnamese and the Viet Cong. So they had to overthrow Norodom Sihanouk.
In March 1970, while Sihanouk was traveling abroad, military commander Lon Nol staged a coup d'etat against the government. Many, including Sihanouk himself, believed that the coup was sponsored by the CIA.
The Lon Nol they were very ambitious. Lon Nol wanted to replace me as a head of state, and the Lon Nol since they were very corrupted, they wanted to be more corrupted without being disturbed by the blames from Sihanouk, etc., etc. So they decided together, Lon Nol, Serimata, Nixon and Kissinger, to wipe me out.
I don't think General Lon Nol would do anything without any U.S. backing. I know that some U.S. diplomats told me that they were not aware. I may believe them because there are so many centers of powers in the U.S. I mean, the State Department may not know what the CIA was doing or the FBI are doing.
While Sihanouk and his father, the nominal king, took refuge in China, American warplanes dropped 100,000 tons of bombs onto Cambodia in the hope of wiping out the Viet Cong activities in the country. It was a brutal, illegal campaign, sanctioned by Secretary of State Henry Kissinger. Sihanouk was desperate to return to power and allied himself with a growing band of communists who were taking over the Cambodian countryside, the Khmer Rouge. In 1973, he even wore their trademark scarf on a secret visit to their training camps to garner support.
The people supported the Khmer Rouge because of him. It was a common struggle. He did not call the Khmer Rouge to join him. He called for all the Cambodians to join his struggle against what they call at the time the imperialist Americans.
They were accusing our former king as part of the reason why the Khmer Rouge came to power in the first place. Without Sihanouk's support, this killing field would not ever happen.
Sihanouk believed that if the Khmer Rouge were able to seize power, he would be reinstalled as king. This proved to be without foundation. On April 17, 1975, the Khmer Rouge invaded Phnom Penh.
I was playing soccer with other kids, and there were a lot of people running to the street and say, the Khmer Rouge came in, the Khmer Rouge came in. I saw the first time the tank came into the circle, and a lot of I saw some kids on the tank with black clothes, and they were frown faces, but they have guns.
On the day of 17 April 1975, I was in Phnom Penh. I have seen a lot of Khmer Rouge troops enter Phnom Penh. They told my family by loudspeaker, could you please go to countryside only 3 days and you can come back after 3 days. You cannot stay in Phnom Penh because there will be immediately U.S. aircraft will come to drop bomb. Not 3 days, more than 3 years, nearly 4 years.
The Khmer Rouge declared Cambodia had entered year zero, and that 2,000 years of history had ended. So had money, markets, education, religion, books, and property. It was arguably the most radical, ill-conceived communist revolution in human history. Having previously courted the Khmer Rouge's support, Sihanouk found himself betrayed.
He was arrested in the royal palace. Phnom Penh at that time, no people, no crowded. So he cannot see anything. About the people in the countryside, he cannot view at all.
For many Cambodians, the suffering and horror of the labor camps in the countryside lives on today.
I miss my childhood. I grew up in the war times. I never been a kid. I never had a toy to play with. I never have a real family. I don't have fathers, many sister, aunt, and uncle to call. Right now, when you look around, the growing of new society, people have their family. So it's upsetting.
I was very close few times to having a really bad dream, and I don't know what to do with it. I got up in the middle of my dream and choked. I literally choked twice in my life, and I was very close to choke myself to death.
They accused my sister of eating the stolen food from the dead body of her own husband. So to prove that she did it, they took her to hospital and performed the operation, cut her stomach open, and she died.
The Khmer Rouge are thought to have killed almost 2 million people, 20% of the Cambodian population. It was genocide on a massive scale.
Same the movie killing film document history good movie killing film. It is true. Okay. This is a bone. The victim that died here. The teeth of the victim here. Oh, maybe the calling the girl, the young. This one. Very sad. Bad man. My father, my uncle died. My sister by starvation of food. I very sad. To the Cambodian people, my family is angry over. No cannot forget.
In 1979, the Khmer Rouge sent Sihanouk to Beijing as their ambassador. The Vietnamese invaded Cambodia in order to oust the Khmer Rouge, who fled to the countryside. Sihanouk was to remain in China for the next 12 years, waiting for his people to embrace him as their leader again. Most Cambodians welcomed the Vietnamese forces with open arms as a relief from the horrors of a genocidal regime. Millions of people returned from the refugee camps across the Thai border. They hoped for a new beginning, but what they found was a country on its knees. The Khmer Rouge had devastated the rural economy. The rice harvest had failed, and the people and army left starving. Exiled in China, Sihanouk refused to negotiate with the Vietnamese invaders, people he had previously considered allies.
You do have this very clear sense that the Vietnamese betrayed the Cambodians by invading and doing all of these things, however justified that invasion might have been. And I think he did have a feeling that the old sort of camaraderie which he had enjoyed with the Vietnamese leaders back in the early 70s, that was gone.
The Vietnamese installed a young former Khmer Rouge commander as prime minister. Hun Sen has remained in power to this day. The Vietnamese finally left Cambodia in 1989. Sihanouk returned to his country in 1991. After years of devastation and war, he was seen as the only way to unify the country. Monarchy was a bridge to a history that had been lost for more than 2 decades. After a period of reconciliation managed by Sihanouk and the United Nations, elections were called in 1993.
It was a turning point in 1993. Sihanouk could have been president of Cambodia, and he would have had much power But he made a mistake because of personal reasons, family reasons. He missed an opportunity to make a real comeback to the political scene.
Sihanouk considered running for office under his own royalist party, Funsipek. In the end, he let his son, Prince Ranarit, stand. It was to be the beginning of the end of Sihanouk's long dominance of Cambodian political life.
After the very clear unifying role that he played, I think he legitimately expected that he was going to probably at least dominate the political scene. I think it is possible that he underestimated Hun Sen.
He was, for some reason, hoping that Funsipek, which was at the time led by one of his sons, would give him a power or would support him after the election to bring him to be the leader of the country. But it was a struggle between himself and his son.
Many wanted Sihanouk to run for president, but his own son blocked the move.
Sihanouk is so unique, with such a character, being so charismatic. He would have done great things for the country. He would not allow the country to go down the drain as it has.
The elections of 1993 were considered free and fair, and it was decided that Cambodia would have not one, but two prime ministers, Hun Sen and Prince Ranarit, and that the country would return to a constitutional monarchy under the unifying influence of Norodom Sihanouk.
The decision made at that time to return the monarchy to Cambodia would be the best choice for the country. Cambodia is a very fragile nation. And when we have a monarchy, it's not a strong institution in this country. It makes people feel a bit better that we are on the right track and we are not going to kill each other.
However, Prince Ranarit and Hun Sen proved awkward bedfellows. Their own armies became involved in open conflict. To compound this, the Khmer Rouge was still active and laying hundreds of thousands of mines in the countryside. Cambodia was once again in turmoil. Throughout the 1990s, King Sihanouk's influence waned, while Prime Minister Hun Sen's power grew.
He was unhappy for so many years. You will see that from 93 on, you will heard from time to time, he put up the statement critical of government and always compare the regime or the government to the past. Until one time, our Prime Minister was able to find a way to shut him up. I will not describe what the Prime Minister said, but he did a good job.
Hun Sen followed a model of rule that began with the Angkorian kings and was developed by Sihanouk.
I won't stop. I won't stop if ASEAN continue interfering into internal affairs of the nation.
Elections take place, but voters are allegedly coerced into voting for Hun Sen's People's Party. Opponents are said to have been undermined and tortured. Cambodia had finally found peace under a monarchy again, but it's peace at a price.
History will tell that when you do not have freedom of expression, when your opponent was scared that cannot live in society, you have to take refuge in the forest and to organize a struggle against you, then you have only one party system, no freedom of expression, then what do you call that kind of system?
I accept to have some restrictions on freedom in exchange for a strong monarchy that defends national interests. But if the monarchy is symbolic, totally powerless, something that is used to endorse a dictatorship, so this is a big disappointment.
Whilst Hun Sen consolidated his power, in 2004, Sihanouk surprised everyone by suddenly abdicating in favor of his second son, Ceremonies, someone untainted by the corrupt politics of the country. He was a ballet dancer based in Prague and was somewhat surprised to get the call to the throne.
ចំពោះការដែលថាព្រះករុណាបាទសម្ដេចព្រះបរមនាថនរោត្តមសីហនុថាមានបំណងនោះប៉ុន្តែនឹងថាភាពមិនដឹងប៉ុន្តែមិនដែលឮថាលោកមានបំណងព្រោះលោកក៏មិនដែលបានប្រឡូកនៅក្នុងនយោបាយអីមិនដែលលោកអត់ដែលប្រយុទ្ធនយោបាយទេលោកធ្វើតែខាងសិល្បៈសាសនា
It was a shock to the nation. Sihanouk hadn't warned anyone of his decision. It seemed like an instinctive move by someone who'd only thought of his own grip on power before, but was now thinking of his country's future.
When he abdicated, he had thought thoroughly that that is the best solution because after him, he would not know what would happen. So he has to secure for this peace and stability a kind of a smooth transition from him. I mean, it's difficult to succeed him because he's still for the people the God King.
2004 marked a turning point in Cambodia's history, the beginning of a future without Sihanouk. However, the past inhabits the present like a bad dream. The country desperately needs closure. It has suffered so much, particularly under the brutal Khmer Rouge, and the scars still fester with those who survived. In 2009, leaders of the hated Khmer Rouge stood trial to bring an end to the worst chapter in Cambodia's long history.
បកកុម្មុយនីសកម្ពុជាជាអ្នកទទួលខុសត្រូវផ្ដាច់មុខលើអក្រិតកម្មនៅកម្ពុជាបដិសេរីដ៏សែនចុកចាប់របស់ខ្ញុំទោះបីខ្ញុំធ្វើដោយគោរពតាមបញ្ជារបស់អង្គការក៏ដោយក៏ខ្ញុំពិតជាទទួលខុសដែរ
The trial provides a foundation to the Cambodia to build upon, to move on and to decide their own future. It's a process and the final judgment of the crime committed overall by the Khmer Rouge. And from there, Cambodians will have to decide what to do with this. They might want to have a truth commission, they might want to have this report, they want to have Buddhist event to cremate all the bone, they might want to have a big parade, they might want to have recognition in every provincial town with a plaque, say that how many people have died.
Cambodia is finally coming to terms with its history. From the grandeur of Angkor to the maneuverings of Sihanouk, there's been an innate feeling of greatness amongst the Khmer people, based in the majesty of their kings.
Cambodian people have been through many generations. You talking about communists, you talking about royalists, you talking about republic, we've been through all. So our people enough to experience about this. What they concern is only they want peace.
The horrors of the past, a lack of good governance, and corruption have left Cambodia disastrously poor at the start of the 21st century. But it is a nation that's back on its feet, with pride, grace, and humor, united under the figure of their beloved king.
ខ្ញុំថារបបរាជនិយមនៅតែមានជីវិតរស់រានបាទខ្ញុំគឺថាទឹកចិត្តរបស់កូនខ្មែរចង់មិនចង់គឺថារាជខ្មែរក្នុងពេលឥឡូវនេះឆ្នាំ2009ខ្មែរនៅត្រូវការរបបរាជនិយមជាជំទល់ជាឆ្អឹងជំនីជាត្រីវិស័យបាទជាអត្តសញ្ញាណជាតិមិនទាន់គឺថាមិនទាន់ហួសសម័យទេប្រាប់គាត់
The monarchy in Cambodia has survived the most tumultuous period in its history and has helped guide the country to peace. And to most Cambodians, it is this peace that matters most.